London SRT Marine is a specialist in global maritime surveillance and security, as well as providing product safety systems. It's just produced interim results, which show that it swung to a pre-tax profit on a more than fourfold increase in revenues. Simon Tucker is Chief Executive, and he joins us now. Simon, welcome. I
Thank
want
you.
to get
Good afternoon.
more into the numbers in just a minute or two, but before then, just explain the business model and what you're presenting to investors.
So we sell what's called maritime domain awareness. So products that enable a person on a boat to understand what's going on around them, a port or water authority to control their ports and waterways, digital autonomous shipping, and also for fisheries authorities and coast guards to control and monitor their coastlines and what we call EEZ, so your maritime territory out to 200 miles.
So, in all that you do, what's brought about this change in fortunes between the loss last time and these interims which show a profit? As I said, in this more than fourfold increase as well in revenues.
I suppose it's a sort of overnight success after 10 years of hard graft. We started this journey all these years ago, developing all this technology. And just as we were about to take off 2.5 years ago, COVID hit. And as an international business where 99% of what we make, we sell abroad, everything just stopped. Last year, we started to see that recovery, customers coming back, re-engaging with us. We signed a £40 million contract in January. We've got £600 million pipeline coming up. And so the interims is just the start of that re-engagement that we've been long working towards.
Okay, I want to talk more about that pipeline in just a minute because that's in the outlook from here. But I want to get some more details about the numbers that you've had. This increase in revenues, you talk about this idea that you're just getting going now after 10 years of hard graft. Is that sort of improvement or quadrupling, if you like, going to be seen again, or is this just a one-off? And is the profit sustainable at these levels as well?
So I don't think we're going to quadruple our revenues every 6 months, as much as I would love that. Remember, that's from a low base, a COVID base. But I think what you see with our systems business, for example, we have contracts that range between 10 and 100 million pounds, and you don't need very many of those. Where you start to see when last year we did 8 million pounds worth of revenue, you see very quick incremental increases in revenue, and because of our margins, that falls straight down onto the bottom line.
Yeah, well, part of this pipeline and part of the business that you're seeing now benefit from, you had this contract, I believe, recently in Southeast Asia, which you've just brought on. Explain more about that. And is that a contract which is out of the blue? Has it been worked on for a long while? Does it take a long while to get these sort of contracts up and running?
So all our contracts take a long time to convert from idea into an actual contract where you're actually starting to deliver. So typically it's about a 3-year gestation period when the customer first approaches you to say that I'm interested in a maritime surveillance system, to when they sign on the dotted line and we start to deliver. We've had a contract in Southeast Asia, which we signed 3 years ago, but the one that we signed more recently was in the Middle East.
You talk about two areas there where I'm surprised, looking into the detail and research for this interview, I'm surprised that that area of the world doesn't already have this sort of level of sophistication in their surveillance for their maritime work, because that's an area where there's a lot of shipping. And you'd have thought that by now they'd already be up and running. But my understanding is there's business there pretty much ready for the picking. Is that the case, or is that just my simplistic view of it?
No, your view is absolutely correct. There is very little maritime domain awareness worldwide. I mean, you only have to look in the UK, where we have trouble enough spotting rubber boats across the very narrow straits that separate France and the UK. If you go further afield to places like the Middle East and Southeast Asia, and if you take the Philippines, they have 8,000 islands, 2 million square kilometers of EEZ, 300,000 fishing boats. Just to put that into context, the whole of Europe has 40,000 fishing boats. And they have no maritime surveillance of any type. The marine domain has never really been seen as very economically important or a threat. That has changed in the last 10 years. And we, by luck, saw that 8 years ago and started to develop the solutions that would be needed. So, without naming countries, I can name one country in Southeast Asia that you expect to have huge coverage. And I think they have one operational radar today.
So how are you doing all this? Is it by radar, as you just said, or do you have drones? What's in the air that gives you this capability of this sort of level of monitoring?
There's no one magic thing. So there isn't a satellite that's parked over a particular country that sees all. You have to fuse lots of different sensor systems. So that they will be satellites, there will be drones, there'll be patrol vessels. There'll also be the towers that you see along coastlines with radars and all sorts of different things. I mean, if I told you, for example, there are special sensors that will detect a light that is used when a fishing boat is fishing. But if there's a light at sea, it's probably not a whale or a fish, it's probably a boat or a person. And so that becomes a target. So all of that comes together, and what we do is then apply analytics that we have developed and visualization techniques to be able to present that almost as air traffic control, but for boats on a screen and an operator. And out of the hundreds and thousands of targets, to be able to identify those three guys over there are most likely drug smuggling. That guy over there is most likely illegally fishing. That ferry over there has gone off track. You know, maybe there's a search and rescue event there. And therefore, they can deploy their limited resources in these vast areas very efficiently and effectively.
So you got some sort of an alarm that rings when you're in a contract and you're able to oversee what's happening, and then you call the Coast Guard then? And
no, we don't.
And that's
no, we don't. We deliver a system. So this is if you can imagine, Heathrow Airport has air traffic control, has its own air traffic control system. Countries like the Coast Guard, let's say in Southeast Asia country, want to have their own monitoring system with their own command center, and they see it on the screen, and they then dispatch their patrol boats, etc., to deal with the problem. So they get the alarm, the alert, little, almost James Bond style. It bleeps on the screen, and it tells them all the information, and they know, do they need to send a big boat because it's got a ferry with 100 people on it, or is it a small boat when it's weapons smuggling, and we need to send something with a whole bunch of SAS people on it. So we deliver the system to the country as part of their civil defense infrastructure.
So have you made any approach to the British Coast Guard? You're talking there about little boats coming across from France. I mean, this would seem to be a good application to try and ensure ultimately we save lives about these people coming across and making sure that the traffic is monitored across even that short space of distance between France and the UK. Are you doing that contract? Is there a contract there, do you think, that could be established?
I don't think there is a contract there. We've obviously spoken to them. The UK has some pretty heavy military assets in the area, which affords coverage, which they've repurposed from, targeting things with missiles and stuff to actually be able to detect these rubber boats. I think the issue across the channel is it's such a short space. So by the time you detect it coming from the beach, they're on our side of the water within about 15 minutes. So I personally don't think detection is a problem. The problem is the numbers that are coming across in such a short area. So I don't think there's business for us there.
Well, I'm always looking for business. I'm sure you are, but whatever. Let me just bring up a share price chart if I can. You'll know this really well. The lower red dotted line I've drawn here is the COVID lows we had back in March 2020, down at 23 pence. The dotted line I've drawn at the top were the highs we had back in January this year. And you've now peaked above that. So you're now back at pre-COVID levels. COVID, I guess, was a bit of a headwind. In fact, you've already alluded to this. And now, obviously, you're coming out of this. Describe what's going on in the share price. What's priced in? What is the true value for a company of this sort of size and shape that you're developing?
Well, I'm not in control of the share price. The rational market is in control of it. I think there's two reasons for the shape of our curve, if you will. I think one is that we've taken longer than we expected to develop our business, and we've got it wrong at times. I can't predict when a government in the Middle East is going to sign on the dotted line. I try because I feel as though I should tell shareholders what we're doing, and therefore sometimes we've disappointed in the past. COVID, of course, was then a bit of a hammer on that nail, but at the same time, that gave us an opportunity to further develop our product. And I think the interims and the news flow that's come out in the last 6 months has started to demonstrate to the market that actually we have a real product with a not very large market that we're selling into, and we've got traction. So we're building our credibility, and I think ultimately the share price will reflect that. As to where that goes, we're not playing for a few £100 million worth of business. We're looking to build a big business in a multi-billion pound, very long-term market. When you have a Coast Guard customer and we sign a £50 million contract, that's not it. There is a succession of contracts over the next 10, 20 years that will keep going, and we have first mover advantage. So
how big a market are you selling into? Is it quantifiable? I mean, there's a lot of speculative estimates, I imagine, about how much business there could potentially be out there. Do we know the size of this market you're selling into?
No, because it's kind of new, really. It's a little bit like when the smartphone market came out. You say, well, what's the size of the smartphone market? You don't really know until actually whoever would have thought that 2/3 of the world population would be walking around with a smartphone when they first came out. Probably not. I certainly wouldn't have forecast that. It's slightly easier with our business in that you can look at the countries that don't have anything. So again, take a country in Southeast Asia that's got 8,000 islands, 300,000 boats, and on that they've got something like 100,000 kilometers of coastline to protect and 2 million square kilometers of EEZ. You can design a system that gives full coverage of that, which is what we've done with one customer, and they would have to spend about $1.2 billion on their system to have complete and total high resolution coverage. They're not going to spend $1.2 billion in one contract with us. They might spend that over 20 years building up in a succession of contracts, a little bit like building an airline. You start with an A320 and then you progress and you buy a few more and then a 777, etc. But your ambition is to build a global airline. So it's difficult to give that sort of forecast, but it is enormous. And the reason those figures aren't sort of fantastical is that what they're doing is protect. If you take the Philippines, they export $2 billion a year of tuna, and you don't need to increase that very much, and you're getting an additional $500 million a year of revenue. 40% of their protein comes from fish for their 100 odd million population. There's huge oil and gas reserves and things. So the sovereignty of your marine domain is super precious and worth that investment.
Well, you say you've got a pipeline of 600 million, which sounds impressive. You've got a market cap of 90 million as of today. You talk about a market where sounds like there's almost limitless amounts of potential. How do you set targets? What are your targets? How long is it going to take you to eat through this pipeline of 600 million? And how quickly do you anticipate that growing? A lot of questions there.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions, and good questions. The purpose of the pipeline is we get lots of inquiries from all sorts of people, because every country is looking to get a maritime domain awareness surveillance system of various types. And we could easily spend all our resources, we are still only 100 people, running around the world seeing all these people. So what we do is we say, well, who is really serious, who's really got the money, who's got the political will to do it, who's taken the decision to proceed, and that's worth focusing 90% of our resources on those. And that is the £600 million worth. And there's about 20 odd contracts opportunities in there with different customers and things. And so we focus our time on that. We would hope to see that 600 million convert into contracts over the next 3 years. That's our hope. We can't guarantee that because the government does what it wants when it wants, but that's our hope. Within that 600 million, there's 230 million pounds worth of contracts that actually we believe are really in their final contracting process and pretty close. So it's a sort of conveyor belt that will sort of keep going. And what is our target? We try to live within our means, and we will build our business as those contracts come in.
Yeah, so let me just ask you then, what's happening in the next 6 months, year or so, I suppose, till the end of your full fiscal year end. Anything that's developing?
Yes, there are 5 contracts that we expect to have some news on, which are worth £230 million. And of course, there's the big news when we sign them, and then we need to deliver them. And they have a delivery time of anywhere between 1 year and 2 years, depending on them. So that's our focus for the next 6 months, as well as delivering the £70 million worth of contracts we already have under contract. And for those of listeners and stuff, if you want to see a little bit of a sort of visual story of what we've been doing, we have a gallery on our website where pictures of our customers using it and all that sort of stuff is around, and you'll get a good feel as to what's going on. So there's a lot happening, perhaps a bit too much, but I'm not complaining about that.
Of course, it's always nice to be overworked, I guess, in your situation. Look, Simon, it's a pleasure. Thanks indeed for joining us. It's been great to be able to catch up with you. Interesting area of the market.
Watch this space. You can track us.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we will. Okay, Simon, thanks so much. That's Simon Tucker. He's Chief Executive of SRT Marine.